What's up, everyone? This is Will Chow of WillYouLaugh.com, aka Will's Personal Development Show. Welcome to my podcast. Today we're going to be covering the topic of the truth about procrastination. It's basically how I have learned to not procrastinate. Now, I used to be a huge procrastinator. I used to go wait until the last day before I would write an essay and try and complete it then. Even when I had 3 months to finish an essay for school, I used to procrastinate on a lot of things, homework assignments, piano practice, and work. Yet in the last couple years, I don't procrastinate much at all. It's still tough sometimes, but I have managed to create sustainable strategies to help me avoid procrastinating. And it still happens. The urge to procrastinate still happens all the time. And, I still get bombarded with things that I don't kind of want to do, but I still get them done. This includes flossing my teeth, meditating, exercising every day, doing an hour of CrossFit every day, writing down my goals, doing the 5-minute journal, and a bunch of things related to my podcast and online presence. Sometimes it gets really unenjoyable to do some of this stuff. Sometimes you just want to sit on your butt and watch TV. However, I've been able to put out consistent blog posts, many YouTube videos every week. I've released over 1,000 YouTube videos and a bunch of other things. And I'd say this not to brag, but to show you that I definitely was a person who was, that average Joe kind of procrastinator. And I used to be the worst at it. And now I've turned around, and so can you if you know the secrets to defeating procrastination. And exercise is probably one of my proudest moments and one of the best examples of how I've been able to conquer procrastination. If you look at my exercise routine, now I exercise at least 5 times a week for over an hour. And that's at an intermediate to advanced level of exercise. This includes weightlifting and cardiovascular activity. Yet, if you go back 3 or 4 years, I failed at exercising. I would go to the gym and I would spend 2-3 hours there, but then I wouldn't return for 3 weeks, maybe a couple months. I would go sometimes the whole summer without working out. And it was something where I would get very motivated like most people and then just kind of stop going and not really emphasizing it, even though I really wanted to create a routine. And so I've kind of had to work out what didn't work and what did work. And I'm very proud of my progress. And I'm not mastered. There's still some things that I still need to work on. But I want to share with you some of my tips on this that I've really worked through, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel and so you can defeat procrastination. I intend to do this in 30 minutes or less. Now, why 30 minutes rather than podcasts that are an hour long? Sure, there are podcasts that are really long, but I think that I can deliver this in a concise, short amount of time. And a lot of people, talk too much, and they just talk to hear themselves talk. And what they could have said in 20 minutes, it takes them an hour. And if I make this too long, you're just going to procrastinate and not finish it anyway. So short is better, and I can deliver it faster. So let's just get started with the tips. The first big tip, and this is an overarching life lesson, is you have to do something you are passionate about. I spent years following the failed model, which was to try and brute force it. If it wasn't fun, didn't matter. I had to brute force it. And of course, in life, no matter how good you get, even if you find your dream job, there will be moments in that job where there's stuff you hate. So there will always be points where you have the urge to procrastinate. But I'm saying on the higher level, you want to make most of your day something that you at least have some passion and enjoyment of. It's not going to be perfect. It never is. But as Gary Vaynerchuk says, even though it's never going to be perfect, you want to look at the higher level to make sure that for the majority of the time, you enjoy what you do. Now, I used to want to be a doctor, so I followed this path like many Asian millennial young people do, I followed this path for a very long time, all the way until I graduated college. So as you can imagine, that's pretty deep into the cycle. Many people give up by freshman year, sophomore year of college, but I stuck it through. I went through those advanced classes. I took the MCAT prep with Princeton Review, and I even took the MCAT, which is the SAT for med school. So I got really far in this process, and every year got harder and harder, and it got more advanced. And the readings every night got longer and longer until you were assigned sometimes 100 pages of really dense, dull textbook material that you had to memorize. And I bring this up because during those years, I had convinced myself that I was passionate about something that I was not passionate about. And part of me knew I wasn't passionate and I didn't enjoy this, but part of me wouldn't let myself believe it because I thought that this was really the only route to a wealthy lifestyle, that the only option. And long story short, I spent many countless nights beating my head against the wall, sometimes literally, because I tried everything to use my willpower to concentrate. But at the end of the day, your body, your mind knows best. If you don't enjoy or are interested in something, it's natural and normal for you to procrastinate. You don't enjoy it. It's not normal for someone to, read 100 pages of dense material every night and try and memorize it if they don't enjoy it and if it's super boring to them. So I think that's the big thing that most people don't get. It's the first thing I ask a bunch of my email subscribers when they write in and they tell me the number one problem is procrastination. I ask, well, are you passionate about whatever it is that you're procrastinating about? If not, why are you doing it in the first place? If you're procrastinating about it, maybe it's a big sign that you should move to a career that you enjoy more. And nowadays, the world has opened up so much that there's so many careers that you can be passionate about and make a good amount of money from. You might not become a millionaire from it, but you can still make a tremendous amount of money from some of these pursuits. And I think there's a lot of websites that really prove this, one of them being Smart Passive Income by Pat Flynn. He also has a very famous podcast called Smart Passive Income as well. And he profiles all these digital entrepreneurs that have been able to make sometimes a 6-figure income every year net after expenses from some of the most random hobbies, including reading tarot cards for people. If you're not sure what tarot cards are, they're basically it's basically like reading someone's fortune, like predicting their future through cards. And there's also a girl who makes 6 figures a year drawing sketches for people, doodles. And there's a couple who make 7 figures per year from selling football plays and teacher workbooks to fellow high school teachers and high school coaches. So yeah, Smart Passive Income is a great place to just get ideas from and get inspiration. And I bring this up especially, I'm emphasizing this, especially for a lot of the people out there who aren't from the USA and they think this whole idea of follow your passion is very uncommon. I got a response back from one of my email subscribers, and I said what I did about, the reason you're procrastinating is maybe because you don't enjoy what you do. And if you look at a lot of the most successful people, they're passionate about what they do. And she says that, well, I'm from South Africa, and what you're saying is incredibly uncommon. I do have a lot of international audience members, even though my channel, my blog, my website is focused on and positioned towards Asian American male millennials. That's really just like how I'm trying to stand out in the crowd. But I really kind of want to cater to everyone eventually. But but long story short, I do have international students who don't fall into the Asian male millennial crowd, and they write into me, and that's what they say. And I say, you know what? It's not so common in the USA either. It's probably the most common out of all the countries in the USA, but it's not common here either. Like most of the people my age, even a lot of Asian peers of mine, Asian American, second generation peers of mine, as well as white, black, all these different ethnicities, I've talked to them and they'll say stuff like, you know what, my parents want me to be a doctor. And it's not just Asians. I mean, I've heard black people say this. I've heard white people, Hispanics. Not all of them, of course. In the Asian population, it's much more prevalent and common. But in general, like all these people that are my age, that are young, they're telling me that their parents are telling them to just find work that pays the bills. It doesn't matter if you enjoy it or didn't. And then their parents will talk, tell their stories about how when they were young, it wasn't about passion. You just needed to find money to feed yourself because the economy was poor. Maybe, their parents were in the Great Depression and you were just lucky to have a job. So I think what is happening here is, of course, a balance. When times are tough, of course, you have to be flexible. And, back in the older days, times were even tougher than they were now. There wasn't the internet where you could find all these hobbyists that enjoy what you do and try and build a following there or try and, build a business. So it's different. Nowadays, there's a lot of hobbies that can be turned into passions. And I'm not saying that you have to go out there and, just figure that out and make it work. I'm saying that, you'll probably find some middle ground. It's not so easy to turn passion into an income. In fact, I think that from many hobbies, it's still not possible. Some people will tell you, oh, you could turn any hobby into a passion. And I think that's completely ridiculous and realistic. I was told this lie, but usually, these people who tell these lies, they're trying to sell you some course and they themselves have only helped like a handful of people do that in a few random passions, and they've done it themselves in their passion, and they extrapolate from that and they just assume, okay, then anyone can turn any passion into a hobby. And, I've tried a lot of stuff myself. It's not easy. Definitely not. And there's tons of YouTube channels I see. I'm a YouTube junkie. I've watched like thousands of YouTube videos, and I've seen plenty of YouTube channels on the most random hobbies that just don't take off. I think there's big trends and big topics that just naturally get more attention and viewers and people who care about reading about them. And that's where the money is. So I'm not saying that everything can be turned into a passion, but I do think that you got to start thinking, if at the very least, if you can kind of pivot slightly, maybe 10%, 20%, 40%, 50% to something that you enjoy more, that you have more fun doing, you won't have the need to procrastinate. The biggest issue with procrastination, the secret with procrastination, the truth about it is that most people fail because they try and use pure willpower to channel through. Now, willpower is important, but the key is so that it's the most fun. When you look at the most successful athletes, some people say, oh, you have to be, the key to success is you have to have a why that makes you cry. That's what they'll say. They'll say, like, you have to have some greater, higher purpose. And of course, that gives you strong motivation. But when you look at some of the most successful athletes, they don't really follow this formula of a why that makes you cry. Like, it's very poetic to, hear stories of people who made all this money because their mom had cancer, and if they didn't find the money somehow, their mom would die. But when you look at these super successful athletes, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Roger Federer, they didn't necessarily have a mom that was dying of cancer. They were just passionate about it. And they loved the sport so much. So I think when you look at these people, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Kobe Bryant, it makes sense why passion would be one of the things that really gets you the farthest, because there's no grind. It's not like you build resentment or frustration with yourself or anger or bitterness because by doing something you don't really want to do, but you're forcing yourself to do because of a greater result. Eventually you'll burn out doing something like that. And I've experienced that many, many times myself. Not only with school, but with many other things. If you just keep forcing yourself and using willpower to push through that procrastination, you'll burn out. And there's certain triggers that really make me burn out still. If I'm working really hard or I'm exercising a lot every day and working super hard and doing all this extra work, one thing that really triggers me to just burn out immediately is, one, if I'm doing something that I really don't want to do, but I have to do. Sometimes that's exercise. Sometimes it's just working harder. And then the trigger that really angers me or frustrates me to burn out is when I'm reminded of that and the reason I'm doing it turns out to be something stupid or not worth it. So I'll give you a clear example. Whenever I used to exercise a lot and do it to impress girls. Now, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. A lot of people work out to get bigger muscles to impress girls. But then when I would overhear, a pretty girl just talk about how they wouldn't exercise at all, and or I would hear how lazy they were, or how they didn't eat healthy foods, or how, whenever I would overhear some girl that was just horrendous, I'd be like, why am I doing all this for? I'm killing myself in a way, just, working so hard, motivated for this, and this girl isn't even worth it. She's disrespectful, or she doesn't even work out herself. She has no work ethic. Is this all I'm working for? This pretty face? And so that really burns me out in a way. And therefore, if you can find your passion, you won't burn out because you'll persevere. You'll do more work consistently for a longer period of time. And there's no resentment because you enjoy it so much. It's fun to you. You're begging to do it, if that makes sense. So I've touched on this topic enough, but I think that's the first big thing. And it's about sustainability. It really is. And that leads me to the second secret of defeating procrastination. And that's about, it's the law of, I call it the law of the tiny nibble, or the nibble technique. But it's really, that's just a fancy way or fun way of saying, do things in small enough bite-sized chunks to work your way up. Here's what I mean. You have to do something in a way that's sustainable. Look at the bigger picture, the long term, not just the short term, what can I do today or this week? Look at the next month or year. What can you sustainably start doing? And that's where a lot of people fail with New Year's resolutions. Right now at my gym, everyone, the gym is more flooded than it's been the whole year. The classes are about 3 or 4 times as large as they were, and that's because everyone has New Year's resolutions. But I've seen this time and time every year for the last several years. By March or April, most of these people are gone, these new faces, because they have this huge flare of motivation. Because first off, they only reflect once a year, which is another mistake. You should be reflecting monthly or weekly. And then they realize how horrible they've been, how they haven't progressed much at all. Then they get this huge flare of passion and motivation. And then they put in more than they should initially, which, isn't sustainable. And then they get intimidated, overwhelmed, and they leave. So how was I able to kind of flip this switch? That's exactly kind of what I did in the past. I used to go to the gym for an hour, and that would turn into 4 hours. And I'd be so proud of myself because I was like, look at me. Look how awesome I was. But then the next day I'd be like, should I go to the gym again? And then I'd look back at that horrendous 4-hour chunk of time and I'm like, I spent that much time at the gym? That's crazy. Why would I want to do that again? And I get so intimidated by the thought that I don't go. And then I don't go. So what's the key? It's very simple. You start with something very small and manageable, and you only increase that after waiting a long time. You let the initial tiny amount be so small that you can't help but not do it. That gets you over the intimidation hump, which is really the biggest thing that you should be worried about. The intimidation hump, and you just keep at that small thing. And again, there's a lot of science behind this. Dr. B.J. Fogg of Stanford University has spent his life studying this system of habit formations in the brain. And he has a whole program called Tiny Habits around this. So I've studied his work as well to create this. So to put it in actual examples, I would start by flossing one tooth a day. Just one tooth. It was so simple I couldn't help but not do it. And here's the key. I wouldn't allow myself to increase that until I was absolutely sure the one tooth per day had cemented into a strong habit. I had to fight my urge to do more, because the biggest thing, the biggest issue that you have to face and overcome is this intimidation from burning out. And when you have people like me who are just super enthusiastic, you're like, oh, no, I can floss 10 teeth today. I'm going to go above and beyond. That's actually a danger, because you do too much for that day and it intimidates you. Sure, you did that much today and you were capable of it. But in the long term, sustainably, that's going to negatively affect you, because it's going to intimidate you and overwhelm you and make you not want to return and do more. So one tooth a day, one push-up a day. If you want to form a writing habit and you want to write every day, which a lot of writers want to do, I formed a daily writing habit by saying one sentence a day. So I think the biggest issue is that people commit to too much. They dramatically overestimate what they can do on a daily, weekly basis when they're starting out. And they underestimate what they can achieve in 5 to 10 years if they're patient and they sustainably increase from a small percentage. So keep that in mind. For exercise, although I had been to the gym before and stayed for 4 hours, I reset. I started at Planet Fitness and I told myself, I just want you to drive to the gym and exercise for 5 to 10 minutes. Heck, you can have your iPhone on and you can listen to a podcast. You can listen to music. There's TVs there. You can watch TV while exercising. In fact, I think I started with even less. It was like 5 minutes, not 10 minutes. I said 5 minutes, that's it. And then afterwards you have to leave. And it was so insignificantly small. It's like, it's 5 minutes of exercise. Are you kidding me? Like the drive to the gym would take longer. So it was so easy that I couldn't help but to do it. I couldn't help but to do it. So that's really the key. And therefore, I highly suggest if you're a real beginner at a certain practice, I don't suggest you start with classes that commit you to an hour of work, like a CrossFit class or a Zumba class or a power yoga class. Not until you've worked up to that level sustainably. And, therefore, if people are interested in something like CrossFit, I would rather suggest that you start with a commercial gym and work your way up so that you can build that habit. I know plenty of people who go to my CrossFit gym and they only come once a week or twice a week, and it's not sustainable and it's disappointing. And that's because they haven't really formed a sustainable habit, because the structure of a class doesn't allow you to build up to it from 5 minutes a day to 10 minutes a day to 15 minutes to 30 minutes and so forth. And again, I want to emphasize the building up process has to be slow and steady. From 5 minutes a day, I did that maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And for about a month before I ramped up to like 10, 15 minutes a day. So it was very slow, but my main goal was to keep coming back, and form that habit. Habits are what govern most of our lives. So you have to make sure that you have good habits, because that's going to affect tremendously how you live your life and how much money and success and happiness you have. So it better form good habits than bad habits. And both habits, they're hard to form, but once they form, they're hard to break as well. So the more good habits you form, the better off you are. Habits form in the brain through neural pathways. And you just have to keep repeating them and repeating them and repeating them until those neural pathways become stronger and stronger, like water current, creating ripples in a stone, in a smooth piece of stone, and creating tunnels. It takes time and repeated effort to create those neural pathways in your brain. So to do that, your focus should not be about intensity. It's about repetition. Again, just keep repeating the motion, even if it's just 5 minutes a day. And then once you get into that pattern and habit, it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 months to do this. But it should be easy initially because you've made the effort so low. Then when you chain that on to making it fun and passionate, it becomes even easier. With CrossFit, some gyms will make it fun by playing games. So rather than like a standard bodybuilding exercise where you're doing the same movements every day, some CrossFit gyms, for their warm-up, still have like fun activities like dodgeball or relay races or stuff that's more fun, so that it doesn't seem like a chore. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. When you chain it with the fact that it's fun and you're repeating it sustainably week by week, all of a sudden one day you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about it, and I'm already driving to the gym. It's become a habit. And that's when it starts clicking. That's when you slowly ramp up and you start seeing progress. One final thing. Remember that everyone procrastinates. Even successful people, even billionaires, even wealthy people. Now, of course, they procrastinate a lot less than unsuccessful people. And they've created systems and processes and mindsets so that they don't procrastinate nearly as much as the average person. However, they still procrastinate from time to time. And I bring this up because I want to highlight that they are human too, that they make mistakes too, that they're not godly people that you can't come close to emulating, that they're just normal people too. They put their jeans on in the morning just like you. They go to the bathroom and take a poo when they ate too much food just like you. So they're not some godly people that are beyond you. They have issues and problems too. So just keep that in mind, of course. And when they were younger, they had problems with procrastination too. I, for one, have plenty of examples to share with you of successful people who do this. I love watching video interviews of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. In fact, I've probably watched almost every single one of them on YouTube. It may seem like impossible, but come on, this guy's very busy. So he only goes on to get interviewed like once every couple months. So all I have to do is really do a YouTube search of Warren Buffett interview, and then every few months go back and do a search and filter by last month or last 3 months. And I just keep, catching up. So it's not like I have to go through thousands of hours of footage. Anyone can do this. But the point is, a lot of his interviews talk about success strategies and how he's been able to achieve his success. And in one of his interviews, this was actually, I believe, the 2016 Berkshire Hathaway meeting, which was video streamed online for the second time ever and on YouTube for free. Now, it's also an incredible lesson on success. But he fields a bunch of questions during this meeting. In fact, I think it might have been the 2015 version. I can't remember, but there's just one point where he was asked specifically a question about firing managers, and he admitted to the crowd that he had this one manager of his that he really liked and was great. But the problem was this guy was in his 90s, and this guy had developed Alzheimer's. So he was incompetent to run the business anymore. However, because he liked the guy so much, he procrastinated until he was forced to fire this guy. It took many years. And he admitted he should have fired this guy years ago, but he did not. And he kind of leaned on the fact that the business was so good that even though the manager had Alzheimer's, the business still ran so smoothly. But he shouldn't have. He should have fired this guy quite a while ago. I bring this up because it just shows that even Warren Buffett, a man worth over $60 billion, still has problems with procrastination. He says he also, in many interviews, he also says that he, has a lot of trouble firing people in terms of, dealing with that and doing it. He doesn't enjoy it, and he doesn't feel like it's something that he likes doing, but it's part of his job that he has to do it. He says everything else about his job he's passionate about. It's just the firing part he doesn't like. And so it just goes to show, even if you find your quote-unquote dream job, that could still be, still could be parts that you don't like. So procrastination may always be there. It's simply, reducing how often it appears and dealing with it effectively when it does. Bill Gates, similar situation. Bill has also mentioned that he doesn't like firing people a lot. And back in college, he used to procrastinate until the last day before studying for an exam. And he had a lot of procrastination problems, but he made it up because he was so smart that he could still get A's even though he waited until the last day. But then when he started in the business world, he realized he couldn't do that anymore because it was causing lots of problems, and he fixed it. So even Bill Gates had issues with this, but when he realized that this was incredibly important, he found ways to fix it and make sure it didn't happen because it was catastrophic when it did. For me, I learned earlier that to deal with it and work on it, and I had developed strategies to deal with it to quite an extent in school because unlike Bill, I wasn't super smart in school, so I had to learn the hard way early on in the form of bad grades, which my parents didn't like. So I had to use parts of this nibble strategy I developed to manage all the homework and studying I did in bite-sized chunks so I didn't procrastinate on it. So what most students did and what I used to do was wait until the end of the night or end of the weekends to finish my homework and study. And that's what I still see tons of students do. Instead, I broke it into bite-sized chunks, and whether it was an essay or a math homework assignment, I would do the first subsection of it, just a tiny part of it, immediately as I got home. So sometimes, especially in high school and college, where in the US, you would sometimes get home at 1 o'clock p.m., 2 o'clock p.m., sometimes even noon. So you still had half the day. The sun was still bright in the sky by the time you got home, which was crazy. So you have all this time for you, and that's when I started. I would just do 1 page of math homework, even though I had 5 pages, and I would just feel so motivated from that. I fed off the motivation of others that procrastinated. Basically, whenever I realized I was doing something that others wouldn't, I fed off that motivation. So I think that's the final big tip I'm leaving with you. I first realized that in school with studying. I would just do the first page of a math homework assignment as soon as I got home. It was so small of a commitment that, like I mentioned, it was so easy that I couldn't help but not do it. I couldn't help but do it because it was so simple. And that built momentum so that, maybe 20 or 30 minutes later, I could do a little bit more. And then by dinner time, I had done more than most people did. And I did it in manageable chunks with breaks in between. So that wasn't even that bad. And the best part about that, especially when it was a larger project, I had already finished a good chunk of it by the time, the deadline started pressing in. And when my peers were stressing and worrying about this because they have this gigantic essay that didn't even start, I had finished 1 page a day or 1 page a week and already finished a majority of it by halftime or by the time the deadline was only a week out. And it wasn't intimidating for me, but it took me years to figure that out. And for years I did it the old-fashioned way and waited until the last minute. So that's huge. And I think the key to really getting ahead on top of bite-sized chunks is this final third secret I want to leave you with, which is simply feeding off the motivation of others who don't do it. So one of the final secrets is the fact that I get so motivated and energized when I show up to a gym or I look around and I see all these other people that I saw the other day not show up again. Now I've kind of lost some of that because sometimes I want to make friends and they're not there anymore, and I'm bummed out and disappointed that they fail to show up. However, I got to remember back to my roots. This was really the thing that really inspired me to just destroy my procrastination. Back when I first got started with this nibble technique habit at the gym, and I used that tiny habit technique, I saw people at the gym, and then when they didn't show up and I showed up, I just started celebrating like crazy. I got so excited because that meant that I was doing something and getting farther than those other people. And I got so motivated and excited each time that happened. You gotta keep celebrating and reminding yourself about that. And I think that's probably one of the strongest motivations. It's kind of counterintuitive. You're basically feeding off the fact that everyone else is procrastinating. So you're basically feeding off of that so that you don't procrastinate. It's a bit of a mix-up. You're kind of cheering other people's downfall, but not really because of their downfall. It's more of the fact that you are getting ahead of other people. It gets me so excited because it's like, okay, you're seeing that progress. Even if it's just one day where that happens, you celebrate that in your mind, maybe even out loud. And that's really what fueled me and built so much momentum every day, every week when I came into the gym. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm doing it. I'm going twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Oh my goodness, those people, they've stopped showing up. I'm getting ahead. I'm staying consistent. Those people aren't. I am succeeding. And you really have to keep reminding yourself and making sure you're proud of it, because otherwise you'll forget. And eventually, it won't be a chore. It shouldn't be a chore to do. You just get so excited and it motivates you to return because you're like, I'm doing this. I'm getting ahead. I have now reached a point where I'm in the top 25% of my age group, or I'm healthy. I'm more fit than those people, or at least I am above average in my ability to go to the gym consistently. And that realization really excited me when it first happened. So I think that's really important. Something that after a few years I forgot about. So I have to keep reminding myself about it. But it really does. It's a huge accomplishment. So that's it. Go ahead and visit my blog, willyoulaugh.com, and sign up for my email list. There's email opt-ins everywhere where you can enter your email. And that's where you get my most secret golden nuggets of advice for succeeding in your health, wealth, love, and happiness, and living the life of your dreams. Thanks so much for listening to this whole thing. Hopefully it helped with your procrastination. If not, or if you have further questions, send me an email and let me know your number one struggle with procrastination. See you guys later. Thanks again.